What is going on, everybody? A happy Monday night to you. Welcome to the Diehard MMA Podcast. I am the better, formerly known as the dog catcher. I am the whiffer of long shots. I am the jester of props and the totals failure. I'm your boy Clint, and I am the host of this show, coming off a really rough week in MMA betting, and we are looking to get back on track. Very much like my wife, y'all were disappointed with my performance on Saturday night, so we need to right this ship and right it in a hurry. We're going to give ourselves 5 seconds to be upset and mourn the loss that was last week, and then we're going to follow the advice of the great prophet Taylor Swift, and we're going to shake it off and move on forward to this next week of action. How's everybody doing? We've got Jason Watson in the chat, Andrew Miles, Nand Patel, we've got Marcus Henry, Mr. Anonymous, my friend Ryan Bonatelli, and Ed, maybe my favorite commenter of all time at this point. How is everybody doing? Thanks for hanging out here this evening. This is odds.com. Make sure you hit that like button below. Make sure you subscribe right here and give the show a share for me. I would appreciate it. I'm going to waste no time whatsoever. Last week, we had a minus 2.96 unit evening on UFC Vegas 4. Thank God for the giant Hail Mary bomb on Rafael dos Anjos to finish the night and get us back some of those units. We did hit a little plus 113 parlay on the Dana White Contender Series on Tuesday, so all things considered, it could have been a whole hell of a lot worse last week. But let's put it behind us. Let's talk UFC 255. And with that, I'm bringing in my guest. We are joined once again by Mr. Matthew Holt, the president of US Integrity. Matt, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Clint. It seems like I picked a good weekend maybe to get away for the weekend.
You did. It was a bit of a rough card last week for me. I took some shots on some underdogs that I felt were live, and none of them came through, man. It was just one of those nights where variance bites you in the ass, and I'm not going to lie, I made a couple of bad picks.
It happens.
It does. It happens. And that I saw your picture of you getting away. That ice fishing looked pretty awesome. And as a fellow desert rat myself, I don't know how you do that. That looked freezing, terribly cold.
Yeah, it was cold. One of the things to remember, and I know that it's great to pick dogs and it's great to hit those big plus props, and but we have to diversify. Value's value. If there's a minus 300 favorite and we think he should be minus 800, that's just as valuable as the plus 200 dog that we think should be a pick 'em. So you always got to remember, you don't ever want to get stuck in one corner. I always tell that to people, to bettors out there. Don't get stuck picking one thing: dogs, unders, overs, favorites. Try to diversify. Value's value.
You know what? That's excellent advice, and I hope the viewers are all listening, because that's wise, sage advice. And I do think of myself as a dog hunter. I always try to find those juicy plus lines, but I'm definitely not sold on it. I lay the chalk when it's necessary. Honestly, I just read a couple of fights wrong last week. Like Randa Marcos, for instance, I completely underestimated her opponent. I thought she was going to be the bigger, stronger woman in there and cause some problems with that takedown offense. Didn't pan out that way. So like I said, sometimes you just make bad bets, man.
That's it. And at the end of the day, people have to understand there's UFC fights almost every single week. And you're going to have those, plus 7, plus 8 unit cards. Well, at the end of the year, that also means you're going to have some minus 3 unit cards. And it's just the way it goes. It balances itself out.
Absolutely. Well, let's focus on jumping back here, bouncing back, cashing some tickets. Thank you. We've got 160 live viewers already rolling with us this evening, and I'm a little antsy tonight. My Vikings are playing the Bears this evening, so got some Monday Night Football that I'm going to be sweating hard right after we jump off this thing. First fight of the night at UFC 255. Man, this card is stacked, Matt. Let me tell you, for those of us that are diehards, the hardcores, the people that watch this stuff and bet on it every single week, we know the casual viewers have no idea what they're in for this week, because there just aren't that many big recognizable names. But this is going to be a action-packed, violent card.
Yeah, absolutely. From top to bottom, you're right. There are so many good cards. And to show you how violent it is, one of the women fighters is named the Queen of Violence.
Yeah, good point. Good point out. We will talk about her a little bit later. So our first fight of the night, welterweight tilt between Luis Cosce taking on Sasha Palatnikov. I'm not saying that right. So we all remember the Cosce brothers, right? Luis Cosce is
Palatnikov.
7. Oh, there you go. Nailed it. Thank you. So Luis Cosce, Dana White Contender Series guy. These two brothers came in. Their team alpha male, kind of halftime training members, and they just absolutely destroyed their opponents on the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. And I've got big hopes for both of them. Louise, in my opinion, is the A side. We always talk about, sibling pairs and stuff like that. There's one that just seems to be a little bit better than the other one always. I think Louise is the A side on these brothers here, but there's a lot of time for them to really prove themselves. Both of them seem to be UFC caliber, in my opinion. He's got high-level wrestling, powerful strikes, heavy hands, 100% finish rate. I mean, this guy's 7-fight career is just a highlight reel. And he's coming in here against Sasha, who fights out of Hong Kong, doesn't have great takedown defense. And I've seen him make some serious, egregious mistakes on the mat. He's a brawler that gives up bad positions as soon as he's on the floor. He does have good dirty boxing range whenever he's in there close. He's got some nasty elbows, and he does have some vicious ground and pound if he ends up on top of you. But he has been knocked out twice with this 5-2 record. This is all Cosce, in my opinion, Matt. What do you think of this one?
So I thought that originally, but you have to give Palatnikov a little bit of credit here. One of his two losses was against Mounir Lazzez, who we saw look tremendous in his UFC debut, coming off a scorcher. I think it was over the summer where he beat Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Al Hassan was I think minus 300 in that range favorite against Lazzez, who was making his pro debut at the time. So, let's give some credit to Palatnikov then, because that's a pretty impressive win, and thus you can excuse that loss. The one thing that makes me nervous about laying the price here is, first of all, we can excuse the one loss for Palatnikov in his last 6 fights, basically, because we know that opponent now is really good, and he's going to enjoy about a 3.5 inch height advantage here, a big reach advantage. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to use it, but I don't like betting against guys who are bigger, taller, longer, potentially naturally stronger. Against the guy coming in, making his pro debut, his UFC debut, we've seen some people melt under the bright lights of a real UFC card before, and the fact that you're going to make your pro debut on a pay-per-view card nonetheless, I agree that Cosce should get it done here, but there's something about Palatnikov that gives me a little bit of pause, and I'm willing to excuse that one loss to Lazzez. And if you are, granted, the rest of the competition is really weak, but he did take care of them, and he is coming off a blowout first round knockout, although his opponent was 5-6, so we could probably throw that one out as well. This one's going to end up being a pass for me.
I got you. Okay. I can totally see that. I can totally understand that. Honestly, I feel like this guy's kind of a perfect matchup for Cosce, though. I mean, you mentioned the height and reach advantage, and normally speaking, I am on that side. Guys statistically, when they've got that height advantage, they've got that reach advantage, especially if they know how to use it, they just have a higher win percentage. It's, there's weight classes for a reason, and if you can have that advantage, it makes a difference. But in this spot, like I said, there's a hole in the grappling game of Sasha, and Cosce is a monster wrestler. I think that height advantage is going to play against him because Cosce is going to have no problem getting in on those legs. And I know we talked about Lazzez. I'm a huge fan of that guy. We actually ended up being on that one. We snagged him against when he pulled that big upset for his UFC debut. So I know all about Lazzez. But I almost feel like Sasha's a bit chinny, and that's another spot where Cosce just has this unreal next level power. It's probably too wide. It's probably a spot where he's getting a little overhyped coming in. But I also think this is a perfect opponent for him to just get another highlight reel finish on. I actually ended up parlaying Cosce with someone later on in the card as one of my favorite spots on the night. I've got a big 2-leg parlay that it's not going to close until way late in the evening. So everyone's going to have to sit tight and stick around to see what the other leg of that parlay is.
The other thing that's interesting about both Cosce brothers is, and many people may not remember, but I see you have the odds up behind you so you could look at it, is they were both underdogs, I believe, on their Dana White Contender Series fights. So an underdog against a similarly matched opponent, suddenly a minus 400 favorite. It seems like a little bit of a jump. I know they were both amazing that night. I just think that's a big jump in odds.
I can absolutely understand it. I understand that angle, and you know what? Hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me. All he's got to do is get the win for me here with this parlay. So, value be damned, I guess, in this spot. Hopefully he comes through and he's the monster I hope he is. The second fight on the card, we've got a middleweight fight. Kyle Daukaus, 9-1, taking on Dustin Stoltzfus, and he is 13-1. Kyle just recently promoted to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt by his brother, the bigger Daukaus, I believe, another one of my favorite fighters. And in this spot, like we talked about, the A-side, B-side brothers, I think Kyle is the B-side brother. I think the heavyweight Daukaus is the one that's got a little bit more upside to him, but he's got a 6 submission game on him. Kyle came in and his only loss was a scramble fest to Brendan Allen, which is a really, really tough out for early in your career here in the UFC. He's tall, he's long, his striking is definitely a work in progress, but his ground game is sharp and he's willing to dive on submissions. He defends with, guillotine chokes and stuff like that when people go in for takedowns. He sells out for that choke sometimes and ends up on bottom because of it, which is something I kind of find a little bit of a red flag. I think wrestlers can take advantage of that if he gets the right opponent, but he's really good at scrambling too. So even if he does end up on his back, sometimes he tries to find a way to reverse it and get on top. He's always looking for the finish, this guy. I like Kyle. I like what he brings to the cage. His opponent, Dustin, really offensively strong grappling, wrestling, his main point of attack, and then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. So one of these guys that, man, I've done some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, Matt, and let me tell you, when you get a high-level wrestler and you teach them just a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, they're a pain in the ass because they get on top of you. They are heavy. They're strong, you can't budge them, and they know just enough submission defense to stop you from doing anything to them. It's awful to be under these kinds of fighters. And he's got a nice high, tight guard on the feet, keeps himself really safe. He has these nice little check hooks that he throws, big clinch knees. And honestly, this guy has been tested. I've seen him take some big shots in there, and his chin is held up. He's been able to walk through it and basically survive the fire and come get a finish. And he's another submission specialist. He has twisters on his record, which, you've got to being able to pull off something like a twister in an MMA fight. That's really hard to do. We've only seen like 3 of them in the UFC ever. So this is a spot that honestly, I almost feel like is dog or pass. I feel like this line is way too wide, and I'd love to hear your thoughts here.
So as much as you thought Cosce was one of those guys that potentially you could put into parlays or even make a play on, I think Daukaus might be that guy. I was more impressed with the loss to Brendan Allen than a lot of people were. I thought his jab was crisp. I mean, he was certainly losing the stand-up, and he got hit with one monster shot. But to his credit, he withstood the barrage that came after that shot. And in the third round, he was putting heavy, heavy pressure on Brendan Allen to potentially get a finish and a rear naked choke there in the third round and win that fight. And I wonder, first of all, I don't even think they would have made this fight had he have choked out Brendan Allen. He'd probably be getting a fringe top 15 guy. I think this is actually a big step back in class for him after that Brendan Allen loss. And on the other side of it, we get a guy who's mostly fought in Germany, Stoltzfus. I mean, some of his fights were actually in We Love MMA organization. I love MMA too, but that doesn't mean I should start an organization. He comes from a gym that's not known for producing any type of elite fighters. His one UFC win, which was a Dana White Contender Series win, he won because his opponent was injured in the first round, and he's giving up 4 inches in height and significant reach. My gut feeling is he really only has one way to win this fight, and that is to get takedowns and end up on top of Kyle Daukaus and outwork him. Because I think Daukaus is tough. He proved that against Kyle Allen. Both times he stepped up in class, Daukaus, his fights ended up going the distance. This one sort of feels like it has go the distance written all over it. I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger on Daukaus here, but I do think that there's going to be an opportunity, depending on what the totals end up coming out later today at, that I could be on the over here. And I'm looking at this one right now. So let's look at this total now that they're up.
Yeah, over 2.5. It looks like minus 125.
Minus 120. Yeah, so I'm going to be on that.
That's a nice little look. I like that. I mean, kind of like you mentioned, he was cruising to the over in those kinds of situations. And with Dustin's wrestling background, his ability to stay safe, defend the submission, we could get a very grindy, grapple-heavy type of fight. I like that. I like the look on the over there. All right. Personally for me, like I said, I feel like the line is just a little bit wide. I totally understand where you're coming from. I don't think I'm actually going to bet Dustin, but it's one of those spots where I could see him grinding out a 15-minute win, and it's enough to keep me off of doing anything with Kyle.
Yeah, I think I'm just betting the over. Now that I see minus 120, I thought it was going to come out in the minus 160 range. I really like it. I mean, both times Daukaus stepped up in class, whether it was Brandon Allen, which he lost a decision, or Michael Lombardo, who he fought on Dana White Contender Series and won a decision. It's gone the distance. When he steps up in class, Daukaus, it tends to go the distance. And he is a tough kid, and he's a big, strong, tough kid. 6'3", and looks strong for 185. I think this one's going to end up seeing the judges' scorecard.
I like it. That's a nice little early look we got going here. All right, next fight up, we've got a welterweight fight. Jouban, 16-7, taking on Jared Night Train Gooden, 17-4. I've got to give a little bit of a shout out here. One of the podcasts I first started listening to before I started actually doing a podcast myself was Half the Battle over there. And I love those boys. They really inspired me to get the ball rolling and stuff like that here. I'm a huge fan. They actually sponsored Jared Night Train Gooden. So it's really cool to see these guys I know from podcasting pick somebody up on the regional scene and back them and then have them make it all the way to the big show. I'm really excited to watch this guy's debut as a fan because of that. I'll let you lead this one off, Matt. Can you tell me a little bit about these guys and kind of which way you're looking on it?
I mean, if this fight would have happened 2 years ago, we would have said, why is the UFC throwing this young man to the wolves? I mean, Jouban for your UFC debut? But that's kind of where I think that talks more about where Jouban is in his career than it does Jared Gooden is his career. Jouban, 11 years older, at 37 years old, 1-3 in his last 4 fights, but 4-4 in his last 8. And when we look at the losses, Albert Tuminov, Gunnar Nelson, Nico Price, the only one that I think of his 4 losses in his last 8 fights that concerns me is Dwight Grant. And he's coming off a loss to Dwight Grant. And I thought the UFC did Jouban a big favor in his last fight and said, look, I know that you've been in there with some tough guys, Mike Perry, Belal Muhammad, again, Tuminov, Nelson, Nico. We're going to get you, and you have a fan-friendly style. He's been doing some commentary. The UFC people like him. Let's step you back down in class, and he couldn't get it done against Dwight Grant. Now, people age differently, and what we do know is that the lighter fighters tend to age a little bit quicker than the heavier fighters because speed is so important. Heavyweights can hang on, and light heavyweights like Glover Teixeira and Daniel Cormier, and these guys can fight till they're 41, 42 because the power is still there and the speed isn't as much of a necessity. But at these lighter weight classes, speed is a necessity. Now, again, this is a huge step down in class for Jouban, who's actually taking on a guy making his UFC debut. So we wonder again, will Gooden, under the bright lights of the UFC on a pay-per-view card, feel the pressure here and come out and maybe have a big energy dump and fade late. But But I kind of like Gooden here at the plus prices. I just think Alan Jouban's best days are well behind him. And I love the fact that Jared Gooden has 7 fights since February 2019. One of the things that I think is most important in the development of young fighters that sometimes people get overlooked. And when we see guys that are rushed up and they end up getting losses and they struggle, it's due to inactivity. One of the problems with moving up the rankings is that you just don't get to fight as often as you would like. One of the real advantages of being young and new and fresh into the UFC is oftentimes you're able to get more fights. 7 fights in the last 16 months for Jared Gooden. I think that ends up being the advantage here. I think he showed some real progression, including a win over Stephen Newell, who was 9-0 at the time that Gooden beat him last February. I think he's going to sneak up and get Alan Jouban here, just a little bit too young, and I'm going to take the plus money.
Okay, you and I see very, very closely on this one, Matt. I like the way you're looking, and you said basically everything that I wanted to say. Jouban's best days are behind him, unfortunately. That 1-3 in his last 4. Not a good look. The only win coming over Ben Saunders, who we know is the most shot fighters. He got that coveted step down in the UFC competition. He made good on it. And like you said, he took that one little inch up on Grant and just couldn't get it done. The other thing I've noticed with Jouban is that he really struggles when he's at a reach disadvantage. His defense seems to be lacking a little bit, and we saw it against Nico Price. Now, I know Nico Price has that freakish knockout power, but the counter shots, when he gets hit with power counter shots, he just can't seem to handle it anymore. And Jared Night Train Gooden is a monster. This guy hits so hard. He's huge. He's physically strong. He may not be the fastest fighter out there. I do think that Alan Jouban is more technical than he is, but he explodes. And I think that explosive counter opportunity is going to be there. I think he's going to clip Jouban. And honestly, I think he's going to put him down. The other thing is, people don't know how good Jared Gooden is on the ground. The dude's a legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, and he fires off impressively fast double legs. Like I said, with that explosive ability, he can lift Jouban over his head, smash him to the floor, and have no problem closing the distance between the two of them and making it a grappling fight if he wants to. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage, like you talked about, with the reach advantage being such a big factor, the age difference here being a big factor. I think Jouban's on his way out, and I'm not a huge fan of betting on UFC debutantes, but this seems like the spot to do it. The only thing for me is, I want to go ahead and tell everybody, we just hit 300 live viewers. Don't rush out and bet Jared Gooden right now. The market is moving towards Jouban. I'm seeing money coming in on Jouban at -140, -135. That line is creeping up, creeping higher. Let's see if we can get Gooden at +140. Let's see if we can get +135. Don't everyone jump on Gooden at +110 and cause it to crash back the other way.
Yeah.
I like it. That's my plan. I think I'm probably going to be on Jared Gooden. I'm just biding my time. I'm hoping to get the best number out of it since things seem to be going the other direction. But it's a good feeling when you reinforce the way I'm looking at a fight.
And Alan Jouban's a household name. I mean, he even does commentary now, so even people that might be new to watching UFC that didn't get to watch him in his prime, like versus Mike Perry when Perry was undefeated, people forget Jouban was the first guy to beat Platinum Mike Perry. But at this point at 37, I mean, speed is so critical at 155. You talk about a loaded division in UFC, it's 155, and Jouban doesn't have the speed or the chin to compete at 155 anymore.
Agreed. All right. Well, that takes us through to, that's the early prelims. They've split this one up. It's a big card. We've got 3 early prelims. We've got 4 regular prelims, and then, of course, the main card. I want to go ahead and give a shout-out to my guest, my friend Matt Holt, joining us, the president of U.S. Integrity, cutting some time out for us to talk fights today. We appreciate you being here. Everybody, make sure you jump over on Twitter, give Matt a follow. And this is odds.com, folks. Make sure you hit that like button for me, share the show out, get the word out. Let's have some fun. Let's make some money here on these fights. The next one up is Daniel Rodriguez, 13-1, taking on Nicolas Dalby, who is 18-4. This is another really, really wide line here, and I think this one may be a little bit more on the justified side. We've got Daniel Rodriguez minus 310. Comeback on Nicolas Dalby is plus 255. Dalby's one of these guys that left the UFC, had to get a little win streak together, and then made his way back, and he kind of floundered in his last fight. He lost to a guy that he was a big favorite over, was not supposed to drop that fight, and on top of that, he got caught with a big power shot before he got taken down and submitted. So when you look at Dalby's record, it looks like he's never been knocked out, but he's been hurt on the feet a lot, and even though that hasn't been the way he's actually been finished, I'm starting to worry about Nicolas Dalby's chin. Daniel Rodriguez on the flip side of this thing, extremely fast hands. We have seen this guy be so fast, huge power in his hands when he puts those combinations together, long jab, cuts angles, but he fires from the hip. He's a little hittable himself. He's a 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy. When he's got people hurt, he's got a nice killer instinct, but he doesn't rush it. He doesn't put himself in danger trying to get the finish. He kind of lets it come to him. I like everything I see from Daniel Rodriguez here. I'm just not so sure about the price. How do you feel about this one, Matt?
I'm trying to find a reason to take Nicolas Dalby. And I know that last fight, again, and this is a guy who owns wins over Cowboy Oliveira. I mean, Dalby has some legit wins. Coming in after that Oliveira win, there was a lot of expectations. And then he had injuries. And when he came back from the injuries, this past July against Jesse Ronson, who everyone was emotionally invested in getting his first UFC win, but nobody actually thought he would win. To your point, it goes down as a rear naked choke loss for Dalby, but he got knocked the bleep out. I mean, Jesse Ronson, who's not a power guy, basically knocked him the bleep out. But go back and watch that fight. The one thing that's interesting about that fight is Nicolas Dalby did look sharp. I mean, he didn't look really sharp. He didn't look razor sharp, but he was winning every minute of that fight leading up to getting caught, and then it just completely imploded on him from there. I think he's actually a little bit technically better than Daniel Rodriguez. And I know most people are going to say, what? Look at Rodriguez. He's smashing all these guys. I think Dalby's technical striking's a little bit better and a little more technical at least. And I think his grappling game is probably a lot more technical. But Rodriguez is a killer. I mean, he is just an absolute killer. I don't know. I've lost money betting against Daniel Rodriguez before. And I was surprised how good he looked against Tim Means. But he just blasted Dwight Grant in his last fight. And I'm like, wow, this guy's a monster.
Yeah, he really seems like he's coming into his own.
And he's good. Again, we're talked about the height and reach advantages. Daniel Rodriguez about 1.5 inches taller, slightly longer here. I think if Dalby's going to win, he's going to have to get his grappling game going early to slow Rodriguez down, and then maybe potentially, because he's a heavy guy on top, Dalby. If he can get a takedown and wind up on top, and at least slow Rodriguez down a bit, then I think his technical striking could certainly help him get a decision win in this fight. This one's tricky for me. I'm definitely not laying it with Rodriguez. It's dog or pass for me. Right now it's pass. And I know it's easy to remember Dalby and how chinny he looked in that Ronson fight, but if you go back and watch the Cowboy Oliveira fight, he looked really good in that fight. So
the only thing on that Cowboy Oliveira fight is I think he's got a bit of a gas tank issue, does Dalby. I think you're right. He's got the better grappling than Daniel Rodriguez does, but that only lasts for about 1.5 rounds.
Yeah.
The reason he won that fight against Cowboy, and I remember this vividly because I actually had a bet on Cowboy that night, was the referee gave him one of the most egregious stand-ups I've ever seen. Cowboy finally got on top. He had Nicolas Dalby pinned in a corner up against the cage, and he gave him about 5 seconds. And since he was kind of solidifying the position before he went to work, the referee stood them right back up, and it cost Cowboy the fight because Dalby was able to get back into it. But you could see you could see the fire in his eyes die when he ended up on his back against the cage. You could see him waving the white flag, and he got bailed out by the official. So even though I think Dalby does have a grappling advantage here, I just don't know if he'll be able to implement it for a full 15. And I think that Daniel Rodriguez might be primed for a late finish. I think the only way I'm going to potentially play this fight is I'll be looking at Rodriguez by knockout. That's kind of the way that I think I'll look, or maybe I'll sprinkle that Rodriguez round 3 prop, hoping that Dalby can hang in there and make it a fight until things get a little bit further in. Might end up being a complete pass for me.
Could end up being a spot where I play the over on this one as well. 1.5 rounds. I could see Dalby having some early success in round 1, getting some takedowns, and to your point, fatiguing like he always does after round 1, and maybe Rodriguez starting to pour it on late in round 2, maybe even getting a stoppage in round 3. But we're at a round total here of 1.5. Yeah. And I saw -125, -130 out there, so that may be the way I end up playing this one.
That's not a bad look. That's not a bad look. That recency bias of everyone seeing Dalby go down so quickly in his last fight, that's not how he's lost the majority of his fights. So I could absolutely see him coming in with a more defensively sound game plan, grappling, and getting this thing to the second or even the third round. So another potential totals look that I actually really like.
And I think he completely ignored Ron Sone's striking. He said, this guy's all submissions. I don't even have to worry about his strikes and all. And he got caught with a punch he never saw coming. And then it just, it deteriorated from there quickly, and he ended up getting choked out.
And that's a good point. It's something we need to remember in MMA, because if you're not game planning for the right opponent, if they come out and do something that you don't see coming, it's the punch you don't see coming that hurts the most, man. So he may not have gotten knocked out if he had taken his opponent seriously, and he potentially sleptwalked through the striking game thinking, I got this guy.
Yeah, I think he did.
All right. I like it. So next fight up, we've got a flyweight fight here between the lesser Shevchenko, Antonina, taking on the queen of violence, Ariane Lipski. Shevchenko is 8-2 as a professional MMA fighter. However, she's got an extensive Muay Thai and kickboxing background. Ariane Lipski is 13-5. The UFC is definitely trying to make something of this young lady. She checks off all the boxes. She's violent. She's good. She knows how to work her Instagram account. She could be the next Paige Van Zandt if she could put some wins together here for them. Antonina, solid technical striker on the feet. She's a regular at Muay Thai, at Tiger Muay Thai, which is one of the best gyms in the world. Obviously, her sister is Valentina Shevchenko that she gets to work with on a daily basis. She throws nice side kicks. She likes to attack with the leg kicks. However, she's just got that gaping hole of takedown defense. She cannot keep a fight standing to save her life. However, she is working on her ground game. She's got very improved Brazilian jiu-jitsu and some sneaky submissions when the fights do happen to get to the mat. The only issue is she's kind of on a clock. She's 35 years old. She's running out of time to make those improvements in the MMA game. Now, Ariane Lipski, on the other hand, she is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu purple belt, a solid striker herself, also working on her ground game. She's got a nice body kick, vicious knees and elbows in the clinch. And you know what? She's really young, but she's shown me all the signs of a real fighter. When she first got to the UFC, they threw her to Meatball Molly McCann and JoJo Calderwood, and she was just so outclassed. But you know what? She took her beating, and she said, more please. She came back. She's working hard. She got better, and now she's on a nice little win streak here, and I expect her to get better every time she comes in here. On top of that, I think she knows the game plan here. I did my Instagram stalking, and she's got a picture with none other than Triple C Henry Cejudo. She might be working that offensive wrestling game for this fight. Talk to me, Matt. How do you feel about this matchup?
I've been trying to find a reason to get on Lipski here because I bet against Shevchenko in her loss to Chookagian. I did think she showed some toughness in that fight, and again was the better striker over Chookagian. But with only 10 pro fights at 35 years old, to your point, we're seeing you can't fill enough holes. At this late in your career, just learning MMA, you can't fill enough holes. And while she's 6-0 outside the UFC, 2 of those 6 wins come against the same fighter Hoon Song Kim, who actually only has 2 MMA fights, and they were both losses to Shevchenko. I mean, her outside of the UFC, she fought nobody. She obviously got this contract because of her sister, and she didn't even in a striking match where she got to go against Roxanne Modafferi, who was supposed to be somewhat tailor-made for her, a bit of a brawler, likes to mix it up, Modafferi. She didn't get it done in there. So I'm wondering, what is the perfect opponent for her? And I know the UFC is trying to accommodate her sister, who is one of the most dominating champions in the UFC. I mean, Valentina at 125 is as good as it gets. But I also don't love Lipski yet. I still think that maybe I still think on the feet, Valentina kickboxing experience is going to be a little bit better than that of Lipski. On the ground, I think Lipski's going to be better because Valentina does not look like she knows what to do on the ground. I mean, Chookagian, who doesn't really have a ground game, took her down at will. I mean, Chookagian never took anybody down. She took her down at will in that
and
fight.
She was helpless, too. She doesn't know anything about how to escape or defend herself from bottom.
No, so that, I mean, to me, it has to be dog or pass, but I don't think I'm as high on Lipski as some. I do think she has I do like your comparison, though. I don't know if she's going to be on Dancing with the Stars, but she certainly feels like she has that same Paige Van Zandt feel. A very attractive young lady, really knows how to work her Instagram account, trains her butt off, and is an action fighter when she gets in there. But similar to Paige Van Zandt, when she steps up in class, it doesn't seem to go well.
And that's the big question, right? We don't know what Lipski's ceiling is yet. She could be the next big thing if she keeps working hard and stays on the trajectory she's on. She could really be something, but she also might go to Dancing with the Stars if we see her peak out here in the next year or two. We just don't know what it's going to be for her. I am very, very tempted. I'm with you. I think this is dog or pass. I'm very tempted on Lipski. This is another spot where I'm going to sit tight because people are betting Shevchenko. And I don't know how anyone in their right mind can lay the wood with Antonina Shevchenko in this day and age. I understand she's a better striker on the feet than Lipski is, but that age difference, the fact that Lipski is going to be the one of the two improving, and also, like I said, just that little tip that she might be working with Henry Cejudo, that might be enough for me to take a shot on Lipski, but I'm going to see where this line goes. She's sitting at plus 140 right now. And, if you get that thing as high as plus 175, I'm going to have to take the shot on Lipski. So we'll see how far this line moves, and then whether or not we end up taking the dog. This one might be a pass, but I absolutely could see this one being a very, very interesting spot to roll the dice there on the dog.
I agree with you. That's kind of the magic number for me. If Shevchenko ever hits minus 200, I'll be on the dog.
Absolutely agree. Yikes. I can't imagine laying that wood on Shevchenko. Even if she wins, that's just something I'm not about. All right. We have got 371 live viewers. Thank you all so much for tuning in here to the show tonight. I appreciate you hanging out with us. I want to go ahead and shout out one of our sponsors of the show, Goat Capital Sports. They've been with me a really long time. Check them out over on Twitter at GoatCapital_. If you want a reasonably priced picks, they have a nice little package pricing, and they cover all the other sports that I can't help you out with: baseball, basketball, football, all that good stuff, and they do a pretty damn good job. Our next fight up here, we've got a middleweight tilt between Joaquin Buckley, who's 13-3, taking on Jordan Wright, 11-0, and maybe not for the, title implications and whatnot. Set those aside. This might be the most intriguing fight on the entire card, in my opinion. So Joaquin Buckley is a gigantic plus 200 or more underdog to Impa Casagne's last time out, and pulls off the most highlight reel knockout of the year. He's probably going to get that award, and floors Impa out of nowhere in the second round. Dude is explosive. He is fast. He's an overnight sensation. Now he's in the public eye, and suddenly he's an over 3-1 favorite. He's taken on Jordan Wright, who is the most, I don't know if I want to call him overrated or underrated. He's 11-0. He's undefeated with 11 finishes. He does have one horrific knockout loss on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series that was overturned to being a no contest. I believe his opponent, Fluffy Hernandez, that night popped for marijuana, and that was in the early days when USADA was being stupid and giving people no contests for weed. So that knockout is not something that we can ignore for Jordan Wright. However, Wright is still very dangerous. He's a guy that's been fighting at 205 pounds, so he's coming down to 185 here. He's big for the division. He's going to have a large size advantage here. Really strong hips, nasty clinch elbows, a good sprawl, good timing, but he's a little bit hittable. He was training at Jackson Wink, which I think is on an extreme decline these days, but he left. He's left Jackson Wink, and he's gone for greener pastures. I think that's probably the right move here, and we've all heard the interview about Joaquin Buckley and the way that he gets kicked out of gyms on the regular because he wants to go too hard with everybody and never really take direction or training from anybody. So who knows where this guy is training at this point in time, but he's a ridiculous athlete with big time power. Talk to me, Matt. What are we doing on this one?
So I have 2 bets already on this fight. First of all, and the first one I bet a half unit on Jordan Wright just because I love the guy. He's so funny. He reminds me of a skinny Chris Farley, and he even has the perfect name, the Beverly Hills Ninja. It reminds me of the movie, The Beverly Hills Ninja. Like, everything about him is amazing. Even when he gets knocked out, the way he just seems to go flying through the air. But I just something, first of all, I think Buckley's massively overpriced coming off that knockout. What we saw in the Kevin Holland fight was that he is way, way, way too short to be fighting at the elite level guys at 185. They are going to chop him up because he's not all that fast, Buckley, either. Super athletic, tough kid. And built like a brick shithouse, basically. But he at that height range, he's going to have a lot of problems with longer fighters. And I think Jordan Wright's one of those guys. And had he not have that impressive knockout in his last fight off that crazy kick, let's just say he loses that fight because he was supposed to lose that fight to Impa. This would be Buckley fighting for his career in a pick'em against Jordan Wright. I promise you this would be Wright versus Buckley pick'em. Buckley trying not to lose his 3rd straight and get booted out of the UFC. So for me, I took a little shot on Jordan Wright, but I don't think Buckley's that big of a puncher, as we saw against in the Kevin Holland fight. And what happens a lot of time with these muscle guys is they look huge, but they don't actually throw that fast. So they're not generating that much power or speed on those punches. And a lot of times people see those big, heavy muscle punches coming, and they're able to at least get a shoulder up, move a little bit, catch it glancing, not catch them perfectly clean. And I think he's going to have trouble getting clean knockouts in the UFC. I mean, it took that crazy jumping spin kick off the guy catching his leg. My gut feeling here is, and the pick I really like is over 1.5 rounds plus 140 on this fight. Because I think Buckley's overrated as a finisher and as a power striker here just because of that one big knockout finish. And at the end of the day, I do think he's tough enough to absorb. We saw Holland hit him clean a few times. He hung in there for a while. We only have to get halfway through round 2 here. And I think it's Jordan Wright who's going to have to endure early. Remember the Kevin Holland fight? It was Buckley early, heavy pressure, just everything into every punch, grunting him in. I think Jordan Wright's going to have to endure those big, heavy, muscle, all-out Buckley shots early. And if he does, I think that this one's probably going to go to the judges' scorecards or at least round 3. But I think at plus 140, this fight's more likely to get through 2 rounds than the odds are telling you.
Wow. All right. There's some people in the chat here liking what you're putting down here, Matt. So one of the very first things I looked at was a total, and I know this was outlandish with a guy that's got a 100% 11-0 finish streak, but I was hoping they'd give us like an even money on a 2.5 because I wanted to play the under on this one. I think that Buckley has officially hit overhyped territory. Coming off of that win, how could you not? You know, he wasn't supposed to be in there. I personally made the bet on Buckley last time. We cashed in on him, and I think a lot of that had to do with Impa having a really tough weight cut. He's a huge dude for the weight division, and he had a quick turnaround over on Fight Island, had back-to-back weight cuts, and he just seemed drained out there. He was not himself that night. So I think some of that aided Buckley, and Buckley is really, really rough around the edges when it comes to his technique. He throws everything with power. He's looking to take your head off with every single strike, but the technique just isn't quite there. He's definitely a monster when he's on. If he connects, you're going to be in trouble. But if Wright is able to mind the range, mind the distance, and he's got a good kicking game, if he can put his kicks to work, I think there's a chance that he can actually weasel this one out. I know Wright has some chin issues, and betting against someone like Buckley on a guy that's got chin issues is always a very, very suspect approach. I'm not sure that I'm going to pull the trigger on this one just yet, but Wright opened up as a plus 275 favorite, and he got hammered. That line dropped all the way down to about plus 240. Now we're sitting at plus 225. So all the money, even though everyone is singing the praises of Joaquin Buckley, all the money so far has been on Jordan Wright. And that kind of makes me feel a little situation like in the NFL. You see that reverse line movement. Everyone wants to bet this side. That's all you see. That's all you hear. And somehow the line moves the other way. The people that are smart, the people that know, they're on the other side. And the way Buckley dips his head when he throws those big winging hooks, his chin is there for the taking, and Wright has got some serious power in his kicks. I think this fight is going to be over one way or the other by the second round. So I wish you luck on that over 1.5, because getting that nice juicy plus line, I don't hate the shot on it. But yeah, this one, it's got me kind of sketched out. I'm very tempted to bet Wright, but I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to have the balls to pull the trigger on that.
Well, I think that Kevin Holland really laid a blueprint for beating Buckley. And certainly, look, let's face it, Wright is not in the same class as Kevin Holland. So I don't want to keep comparing the two. It's just another much taller guy that Buckley fought, where Holland never had to throw anything hard at him. Buckley, his technique is so bad, and he punches so hard and slow with these whooping hooks that it was kind of easy to just eat him on the gloves, eat him on the shoulder, jab, jab, move out of the way, control range. If Wright watches that Holland fight, I don't know that he has to go heavy back at Buckley and put himself in danger, especially early. I just think he has to use his leg kicks, use the front kick, control the range, and he may find this fight a little easier than he thought.
That's an interesting take. I like it. That dog is on my radar. Definitely, and we'll see where this line ends up going. I hope I'm not wasting myself here. I would like to see it bounce back up the other way. If I could have gotten anywhere near that opener, plus 275, plus 280, I would have loved to have taken a little flyer on him. So we'll see where this thing moves throughout the week. But y'all heard it. Matt Holt's got not one but two plays on that fight, so that'll be very intriguing to watch. Another super interesting fight coming up here. The final preliminary fight, Brandon Moreno taking on Brandon Royval. Now, one of my favorite spots here on the card. I did go ahead and already lock in a bet here. We've got the Battle of the Brandons at flyweight. Moreno is 17-5. Royval is 12-4. And these guys are almost mirror images of each other, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Brandon Royval so much, and I ended up betting him already. And I actually like Bam Bam Moreno a lot, too. I think Bam Bam Moreno has gotten a lot better. If you go back and watch the Brandon Bam Bam Moreno fight, and we'll call him Bam Bam just so we don't call them both Brian. If you go back and watch the Bam Bam fight versus Sergio Pettis, he had no striking game whatsoever. He had an amazing takedown game, almost choked out Sergio early in the fight, but literally was helpless on his feet. All he could do was throw big, huge, overhand whooping rights, and his stand-up game was terrible, but it has gotten a little bit better. So I have the utmost respect for Bam Bam Moreno. I just love Brandon Royval. We had him in his last fight. We were all over him, both of us. He reminds us both of a young Nate Diaz. Has that attitude, has that tall, long body. And people say those strikes don't look like they hurt, but before you know it, he is punching you in the face everywhere. And we saw Royval on the feet again in his last fight, and it's kind of like Nate in the early days. Nobody thought Nate could strike. Oh man, look at this guy. Just little jabs out there. But I mean, he is long, throws straight punches, and he hurts people. He destroyed Kai Kara France, who was a big favorite over Brandon Royval. He's a beast on the ground. His jiu-jitsu is sick. Man, I love Royval, and I already bet him this week. And, I don't like betting against Bam Bam Moreno because I think he has good experience, and I think he's training his ass off to try to get better. I just think his ceiling is much lower than Brandon Royval's ceiling. Brandon Royval can be the 125-pound champion, and because of his long body, could also go up to 135 and win that title as well 5 years from now, where Bam Bam Moreno's his ceiling is probably reaching the top 4 in the rankings.
Matt, we disagreed on a couple fights early in the evening, and it's been nothing but agreement since. I went into the tape this week fully expecting to throw Brandon Moreno in a parlay. I've been singing his praises for the last several years. I've been on his resurgence here in the UFC since he buckled down, worked hard, improved, and I fully expected to bet him here in this spot. And I was one of those people on Royval against Kai Kara France the last time out. We cashed that nice big fat underdog ticket, so I felt a little bad that I was going to turn around and fade him in his next fight. But watching the tape told me a different story. I could not agree with you more that he has a higher ceiling than Moreno. Even though Moreno has come such a long way, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, whereas Royval is a brown belt, and his Jiu-Jitsu is actually a higher level. Brandon Moreno, he's got good boxing. He's come a long way with his hands. However, he's incredibly hittable. Brandon Royval uses knees and kicks, flying attacks, that spinning elbow that he's got. He's got power in those shots. Moreno is a guy that will have to basically tee you up for 15 minutes and grind out a 15-minute decision. Royval can end a fight in 2 rounds. And I know MMA math doesn't work, but both these guys just fought Kai Kara France. And Moreno almost got knocked out by him and then went life and death with him getting to the judges' scorecards, whereas Royval got rocked by him and put him away in the second round. And I used Brandon Moreno as a measuring stick for betting Royval against Kai Kara France. That was the example I used. I went, look, he looks so much like this guy. He's going to be able to do the same exact thing and win in this spot as an underdog. Now, comparing them both directly, I don't see a single area besides the technical boxing that I think Moreno is better than Royval. I think this should be a 50-50 fight. Minus 110 on either side. If you're accounting for the experience of Brandon Moreno in the UFC, you could make an argument that Brandon Royval should be the favorite in this fight. And I went and put a 2-unit bet on Brandon Royval at plus 160.
And I love young fighters who go all in early, who say, look, I know I'm not making a lot of money yet, and I know life's going to be hard, and this isn't going to be some rich, luxurious life yet, but I'm going to go ahead and take this extra money I have and give it to Factory X, basically, so I can go train with the best guys in the world while I'm in my early 20s and get better, so that when I'm 30 years old, I am making the money I hope to be in this profession, in my craft, and Royval did that. He's training with some of the best guys there is at Factory X, and his improvement fight to fight has been awesome.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. And Factory X Muay Thai, you said it. Like, what a place to be. He's surrounded by the right people there. I think the sky's the limit for this kid. And I went from thinking that Brandon Moreno was a sleeper to potentially challenge for a title to thinking that, unfortunately, Brandon Royval is actually the one who's going to be headed for the championship. So I'm big on the underdog, and I'm going to ride this train until the wheels fall off, man. If you keep giving me plus money on Royval, I will simply keep betting him.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you all very much for hanging out with us this evening. There is no link to hit. There is no switching of the streams. We are hanging out right here on YouTube. This is Odds HQ. Make sure you subscribe. Give me that thumbs up. Give me a like here. We're putting in some work for you, bringing you the best sports betting content on the net today. And we're about to talk about the main card of UFC 255. And this is a good one. Like I said, extremely underrated. For those of you that don't know, you're going to learn today. We're starting the night off with a huge rematch, maybe my most anticipated rematch now that we finally got by Ion Cutelaba and Ankalaev. We've got Mauricio Shogun, who had taken on Paul the Bear Jew Craig. I don't know what took them so long, Matt. This rematch should have happened immediately after the first fight, but we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary, and these boys are going to run it back.
I got a little money-making secret on this fight, and I've used it a couple times already. So I know a lot of people are excited about this fight, and they talk about, Paul Craig's jiu-jitsu and how he gets all these subs in fights he's going to lose. Forget about all that. Challenge anyone you know to say, hey, tell me the 3 guys that Paul Craig beat in the UFC. And even if they could see him or remember him, they can't pronounce any of their names, so they'll never say them all. They'll at least won't be able to pronounce one of those names, and they'll never get it. Easy money.
I like that. That's a nice little trick. Everyone can go hustle their friends for 10, 15 minutes now after the show. So we've got an absolute legend in the sport, Mauricio Shogun Rua, 27-11, coming in here against Paul the Bear Jew Craig. One of these fighters that is just, I've got such a weakness for them, Matt. There's a short list of fighters who are deadly finishers that are live and die by the sword fighters. Nico Price, Paul Craig, these kind of guys that I just love, and I can't hardly keep myself from betting on because they can win the fight from any position at any point in time, and somehow I feel like I need to put my money on them. Like you said, sick Brazilian jiu-jitsu on Paul Craig. He's finally starting to put the pieces together and do what he needs to do. He was a bit of a bum when he first got to the UFC, but I feel like he's trending in the right direction. Shogun, obviously getting near retirement, probably only got a couple fights left in him, but somehow he's found the fountain of youth. This guy refuses to die. He can still go 15 minutes. He can still hit like a Mack truck, and I don't know how he does it, but every time he gets rocked, he manages to recover and pull out. He's still not getting knocked out by these guys. So in the last fight, just 1 year ago, Paul Craig was a 2-1 underdog. I took that shot. I absolutely, without a doubt, took that shot. 1 year later, that line has flipped. Paul Craig is minus 165 right now with the comeback on Shogun Rua plus 145. How much of a difference do you think that year made, especially considering the first fight was a draw?
Yeah, and the one judge that had, it was 2 draws and 1 judge for Shogun, right?
I think so.
I mean, at the end, yeah. So, I mean, nobody had Craig winning that fight. And at the end of the day, what's interesting is the UFC threw Paul Craig in front of Shogun because he was supposedly, his jiu-jitsu was great, but he couldn't strike at all, and Shogun was going to knock him out because Paul Craig's weakness was the knockout. I mean, I think Craig was just coming off that Alonzo Menafield knockout, and he had been KO'd previously, and they're like, oh, this guy's tailor-made to make Shogun look good. But if you want to see what's left in the tank for Shogun Rua, just go back and watch his last fight again. If you missed it and you look on paper, you go, oh, he beat Little Nog again. He didn't beat Little Nog. First of all, Little Nog got robbed in that decision. But when you're getting robbed, when you're having to steal decisions against 45-year-old guys in their retirement fight, that's not a good sign. He looked so slow in that fight. You talk about being hittable. It was Shogun who looks hittable. Little Nog was able to land that jab and that left hand all day long. I think it's Shogun Rua who shot. Unfortunately, this is going to be one of those lines, and part of shopping around for the best line is to be able to predict accurately more than 60% or 55% of the time where lines are going to go. This line is going to come down. Shogun Rua is a legend. Shogun Rua is a recognizable name. Shogun Rua is a guy who's a knockout artist, fighting a guy who early in his career, especially Paul Craig, had all kinds of issues getting knocked out Paul Craig. I actually think this line's going to come down, and the second it goes below 150, bet Paul Craig.
I like that. I like that a lot. If you go back and you watch the previous fight, I think this is a story of preparation because Paul came out and looked like he wanted to run through a legend. In round one, he completely emptied the tank trying to put Shogun away, and he did it on the feet, which is not the area where Paul Craig is very experienced. He's a grappler. He's a submission guy. So if you come out and you set a personal record for significant strikes thrown in the first round, that's going to wear you out. It's like someone who rides a bike for, competitively speaking, going and swimming a race the next time out. Your body's just not used to it. So he had nothing left to give after nearly putting Shogun away in the first round. And I'm right there with you. And honestly, I'm very tempted to look at Paul Craig inside the distance because I think he fell just short last time, and I think he gets it done this time. I don't think he's going to let the opportunity slip by him. And you nailed it on the head with Shogun's last fight. I really thought that Nog should have got the nod in that fight. And eventually, I keep saying this, it keeps not happening, but eventually Shogun's chin is going to crack. And I think if Paul takes his time just a little bit more on the ground, he should be able to get that submission.
And what was interesting is without really trying for takedowns, because let's face it, Little Nog, the older you get, it's harder to get takedowns. It's just harder to secure them, shoot that double leg. Little Nog got a takedown in that fight. I mean, he took Shogun down easy in that fight. Everything about Shogun in that fight looked aging, slow, done. And I get the idea of, hey, let's put these aging guys together. They have a history. That's fine. It's fun for the fans. I'm not sure this fight makes sense, though. I know they had a draw. But how does Shogun win in this situation? I mean, if he wins, you're supposed to win. It's Paul Craig. He's not. No, your career doesn't suddenly catapult anywhere. But on the other side, I actually think the UFC likes Paul Craig. They think he's fun. He either finishes guys or gets finished. He stays in fights. He gets submissions with like 5 seconds to go against Ankele. He's got some amazing submissions at the end. This is a guy who's in fun fights. And Shogun's probably headed for Bellator or, one or somewhere where he can fight other aging guys, like go fight Chael again in Bellator or something. But he doesn't belong in the UFC. I mean, that fight with Little Nog if he fought that same exact fight, that same exact speed, that same exact skill set that night against anybody under 40 active in that division, he loses. And I thought he lost that fight. I thought Little Nog won the first 2 rounds and Shogun came back and got the last one. But I think Paul Craig, but I think the line's going to go down. So don't lay $1.60. Wait, I think you can lay $1.40 by fight night because Shogun is so recognizable. And if you just break these two down on paper, don't watch their fights. If you just do a quick analysis, you're going to go, well, man, Shogun's a devastating knockout striker. Paul Craig's been knocked out. That seems to be his weakness, is devastating knockout strikers. And I get Shogun at a plus. Heck yeah, I'm in. The math and the stats, just pure analysis, might swing people toward Shogun Rua, but that's the beauty of MMA. This isn't a football game. This is an aging fighter who isn't the same guy that got all those great knockout wins against a submission whiz that's gotten a lot better on the feet, and Paul Craig's going to win this fight.
I completely agree. And people got to remember that this guy is getting old. He's a legend. He's not going to look like he used to. And honestly, I think that power is slipping. It just doesn't seem to be where it used to be. And in the first fight, that was apparent because he had 2 full rounds of a gassed out Paul Craig to be able to put him away and hit him with that power shot and couldn't find it. So I definitely don't think in the rematch he's suddenly going to hit harder or he's going to find an opening that wasn't there the first time. Because, man, if you're tired after 1 round, if you're gassed out and laying on your back for 10 minutes, what other opportunity could you be looking for? Paul's not going to slip up any worse than that in the rematch. So I think Shogun had his shot. I think the line's right. And I'm with you. If we can keep an eye on this one, hopefully some money comes in the other way. If it doesn't, if Paul ends up being a minus 200, the only problem that I have with this guy is his fight IQ. He makes very questionable decisions. So I wouldn't suggest parlaying him. Like I said, maybe take him by submission inside the distance, something like that. But anytime you bet on Paul Craig, there's some banana stuff that can happen. He can make some very, very poor choices in there. So in no way is he a lock, even though we think he should win this fight.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. We are coming up on another very intriguing fight. I know you guys are probably getting sick of hearing me say that, but this entire card, top to bottom, in my opinion, is really fun from a matchup standpoint. We've got Katlyn Chookagian, 14-4, taking on Cynthia Calvillo, who is 9-1. Really quick turnaround for Katlyn Chookagian. She's coming off of her absolute demolishing loss against Jessica Andrade, a spot where I have a personal beef with Katlyn Chookagian. I can't stand betting on her. She's robbed me so many times when I bet against her, and I finally took the plunge because I thought the size difference would just be too much for Andrade, and she made me pay for that too. So I have a problem with Katlyn Chookagian, and here she is taking on Cynthia Calvillo, another smaller fighter who's moving up in another weight class. And again, we just got to talk about that height and reach. That's kind of the story of this fight, in my opinion. Cynthia Calvillo, she's a grinding wrestling type of fighter, really grappling heavy approach. She's worked hard on her boxing. Her striking is improving, but she's 5'4" with a 64-inch reach. Chookagian is 5'9" with a 68-inch reach. She's going to have a field day as far as being able to put that height and reach to her advantage. And with Cynthia Calvillo coming up a weight class, can she take down Chookagian? She doesn't have that mauling, vicious power that someone like Jessica Andrade does, where she can just pick them up over her head and slam them to the floor anytime she wants. That's not her style. She's more of a double leg, single leg, trip them, take them down. And we've seen Chookagian be able to defend those kinds of spots and get out of those kinds of takedowns. So I feel like this is another recency bias situation where the line might just be a little too wide, with Calvillo being minus 250 and getting plus 200 on Katlyn Chookagian. What do you think, Matt?
This one's interesting to me. I have been on the right side of some Chookagian fights. I mean, the one fight I bet her the most was against the older Shevchenko sister, which I couldn't believe that Katlyn was a dog in that fight. If you watch the older Shevchenko, we already talked about it, 35. She just doesn't have much in terms of an all-around skill set, and Chookagian exposed that by continuously taking her down. And I also bet her against Jennifer Maia, who I thought she looked really good against, and neutralizing Jennifer Maia's ability. And I don't know that she was fighting a bad fight against Andrade in that last one. That one body shot changed everything. Up until that point, I thought Chookagian, because let's face it, Andrade is always going to win the first round. If Chookagian and Andrade fought 100 times and Chookagian wins 28 of the 100 or 30 of the 100 fights, even in those 30, Andrade wins round one. That's just her style. She's a fireball. But I thought Chookagian was actually doing a good job of striking at range in that fight. And then she got hit with that body shot, and that was it. That was the end of it. Now, Cynthia Calvillo, I think, is actually other than Valentina, other than the younger Shevchenko, the champion, the most dominant champion we have in all of MMA, I think that this is probably the second toughest fighter that Chookagian's ever fought. But Calvillo she is so little at this weight class. I know she had trouble making weight at 115, but her body and her size says get a dietitian specialist to help you lose that weight properly and kind of readjust your body frame to properly carry enough weight to fight at that. Even though she beat Jessica I, was anybody blown away, impressed with the performance by Calvillo against Jessica I? And Jessica I is a slow, plodding, at this point, it's not good, right? So I don't understand. I don't know. For me, it's Chookagian or pass, and I'm thinking about doing it again. I do think that if you want to plug something into parlays, and I don't have any here, but if you're saying, hey, are there any parlays that you feel really good about, whether it's a favorite or a big minus? I think over 2.5 rounds here is about as solid as it gets. Chookagian has 14 career wins. 11 of those went to decision. She has two career knockouts, one sub. She is not subbing Cynthia Calvillo in this fight. That is for sure. And she's probably not knocking her out either because she's not a power striker. And at the end of the day, Calvillo may choke her out if she gets on the ground, but Chookagian's been working on her ground game so much. That's been the big emphasis for her. She was so excited to get to show it off against the older Shevchenko. I actually think because of her size and length, she's going to be a problem to try to submit. I do think this one's going to the judges' scorecards. I don't have a bet personally, but if you're one of those people that likes to parlay things in this spot, over 2.5 rounds might be as safe as anything on this card.
That might be the legitimate lock of the night. I mean, it's minus 380 right now, but for good reason. You know, Calvillo at this size, she doesn't seem to be as much of a threat because of that size discrepancy. And Chookagian is just a decision machine. She has no ability to finish a fight. She had the other Shevchenko on her back, full mount, for like 2 minutes in that fight and still couldn't get a TKO out of it. So, yeah, that's a good call. I completely agree with that. The issue for me, I've got that recency bias. I've been burned by Chookagian, whether I bet on her, whether I bet against her. So it makes me kind of hesitant to go anywhere near this spot. But I just feel like the line is so incredibly wide. And that's coming from a guy who doubled down hard on Cynthia Calvillo when she fought Jessica Eye. We bet Calvillo, I think she was minus 120 at the time, against Jessica Eye, and then we did the post-weigh-in show. We saw how she came in on the scale. I was shaking on the scale, so we doubled down. We went hard on that spot because I had a really rough weight cut, and because of that, we had an easy coasting cash there. But like you said, she wasn't impressive in that fight, even though she got it done. The stats show that she outlanded her, 113 significant strikes to 73, but she got 4 takedowns. That was primarily ground strikes, and Jessica Eye didn't really offer up any kind of a defense there. So I feel like this is very, very similarly to the Joaquin Buckley spot earlier in the night, where the favorite has a big light shown on them and everyone's high on them now, and I feel like the line may have swung a little bit too hard the other side. I'm very tempted to roll the dice one more time on Katlyn Chookagian, even though I know everybody in the chat is just going to absolutely lash me and I will get hell on Twitter for it. But we'll see where this line goes, because once again, it's just money pouring in on Calvillo. She opened up minus 172. Now she's minus 250. And again, let's watch the line, because it opened up plus 150. The bookmakers know this fight is a lot closer on paper than the public seems to think. If it gets up to plus 250, holy crap, like that would be a must bet situation for Katlyn Chookagian, in my opinion.
And I think what's interesting here, and I think what makes Chookagian more alive here, is that if you think about the last fight for Calvillo, she thought she was going to get a title shot off that fight. But then it wasn't an impressive performance, and she was in the main event. It was 5 rounds of sleepwalking through it. So at the end of the day, and now she wants another title shot, and she knows she can't just do lay and pray for 5 rounds, because there's no way she's going to get a title shot, and she desperately wants that shot against Valentina Shevchenko. So I think she may take more risks on the feet, just trying to look impressive and make it more of an exciting fight, so she'll stop getting passed over. Because let's face it, if you had to pick, if you're UFC, all things are considered, I could throw Jessica Andrade in for that title, or I could throw Cynthia Calvillo, and I have to sell tickets. Which one am I putting in there? Putting Jessica Andrade in there, because she's going to go in there and bang, and it's going to be more of an exciting fight. So I think Calvillo knows that. She's going to try to make this more of an exciting fight, but when she's at her best, it's because she's getting takedowns and landing ground strikes. It was never in question, that Jessica Eye fight. She dominated every round. They were just 5 really boring dominating rounds. Yeah. So I think maybe trying to get that title shot, she says, I'm going to stand and bang with this girl, plays right into Chookagian's hands. And at 2-1, maybe we get to be more alive than we would if she just shot takedown after takedown.
Yeah, that's entirely possible as well. And hey, like I said, I've been on the wrong side of Katlyn Chookagian. The kiosks that she does, sells it to the judges for some reason.
Yeah.
She misses her opponent by a mile, but she yeah. That's all she does the whole time. And somehow, like I always got to go back to I think the Joanne Calderwood fight. I bet my girl JoJo in that fight. And I was robbed blind by Katlyn Chookagian because she made noise the entire time, and it seemed like she was striking a whole lot more than she actually was, especially here when we've got the empty arena, no fans, no nothing. Those judges, all they're going to hear is Katlyn Chookagian. Yeah, plus 200 seems like a spot where she might weasel out a split decision. So we'll see if I end up going on that one. I've got some PTSD from my last round of women's MMA bets, so we'll see. But I don't hate it. I don't hate it. Absolute train wreck of a fight coming up next here. We've got a welterweight tilt between Mike Platinum Perry, 14-6, taking on Tim the Dirty Bird Means, who is 30-12. And this is the third fight down on the card because these guys are just so entertaining, even though this fight is kind of a mess. Mike Platinum Perry, he's 2-3 in his last 5. Tim Means alternates wins and losses and has essentially for the last 6 years.
and he's coming off a win.
He's coming off a win, so if that tells you anything, he's got the pattern going. Mike Platinum Perry, just kind of a raw power puncher, took his stab at becoming a more technical striker, and that really seemed to hurt him more than help him. It's funny, he had an interview that I actually really enjoyed listening to because he talked about the fact that he was kind of a caged dog, and when you try to put the muzzle on a caged dog, he's just not as tough. And I was like, that kind of makes sense. He's a wild man that just goes in there and throws haymakers, and that worked for him. Obviously, it's not going to work at a high level if he understands he's just a mid-tier type of fighter. Let him run wild, and he'll probably see a little more success because now he seems to be pulling back and holding himself back in spots where he otherwise would have gone for it. And he's coming off of a really ugly win over Mickey Gall, of all people, who, believe it or not, outstruck Mike Perry in the first round of their fight. And he's talking about his, he's doing the family thing. He's got this new girlfriend who he worships as his goddess, and he is having a kid that he's all about. I wonder how much his mind is actually in the MMA space these days. And if you watch any of his training videos, his Instagram stories, anything like that, man, does he look rough on the feet. It does not look like this guy has been in a professional training scenario for the last couple of months. And I don't know if that's Mike Perry playing possum because he's the crazy enough type of guy to pull some shit like that, but he does not look good or in a good mental space to me. What's your take on this fight, Matt?
Do we have any idea, and maybe it got announced and I don't know, that who's going to be in his corner?
We have no clue. He tried to raffle out the corner. He literally tried
I saw that, yeah.
Did you see that Darren Till wanted to buy the corner?
Yeah, I was going to give him $5,000, and Mike Perry said no, and then Dana said enough of this.
Shut it down.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't think Mike Perry's focused at all. And I think the one thing, if you go back and look at Mickey Gall, because I was blown up, because Mickey Gall has no striking ability.
No.
But I was pleasantly surprised that A, I thought he won round 1, and B, came back and, he lost round 2 and 3, but he didn't get blown away. And I was like, how the heck is Mickey Gall staying in a stand-up war with Mike Perry for 3 full rounds? I thought Perry was going to blast him out in a minute. And yet they stood and traded for 15 minutes, and Mickey Gall didn't get destroyed that much. And one of the things I noticed, to your point, because Perry has no technique anymore, whatever technique he came into the UFC with, and he did have some, it's gone. He's not training with any type of professionals anymore. He's hitting the heavy bag in his garage and then going and lifting weights. That's all Mike Perry's doing. And if you look at the body types, Tim Means has the same body Mickey Gall does. Tall, long, except Tim Means is a lot better striker than Mickey Gall and uses his knees and uses his elbow and has a really nasty Muay Thai clinch game with those knees and elbows. Granted, Tim Means is also on the wrong side of the mountain in terms of peak and tends to lose when he steps up kind of above his natural ceiling. But I don't think that Mike Perry's above his ceiling anymore. I think that Mike Perry at this point is actually below it. I haven't played it yet, but for me, it is all Means or pass. And I don't want to bet Tim Means in this spot, but there's no possible way I'm betting Mike Perry.
I couldn't agree more, Matt. And you know what? We have 435 live viewers on the show with us right now, so I've got to give my speech again. Please, don't everybody rush out and bet Tim Means right now. People are betting on Mike Perry, and I want to bet Tim Means, but I want plus 140. I want plus 145. I want plus 150. I'm going to be greedy and sit back and wait as long as I can to get the good number. I've got this weird thing in my brain telling me that Tim Means is a shot fighter. He's not durable. He's not tough anymore. And you know what? In his last fight against Leonardo Strapoli, that kept me from actually pulling the trigger. I told everybody that I thought he was going to win the fight. He was an underdog, and I felt like he is the more technical striker in that matchup. And as long as he just keeps his head safe, he should be good to go. But you know what? He ate some shots in that fight, and he dug deep, and he stayed in there, and he came back, and he won the damn thing. And I feel like an idiot for missing out on a really good spot to back a veteran fighter at a dog price. This is the same exact situation. So we talked about Daniel Rodriguez. Dude's got fast hands, explosive power, and a sick submission game. Okay, that guy caught Tim Means. Nico Price, he TKO'd him in the first round. Nico Price has ungodly knockout power that is just freakish for this division. Okay, he got caught there. But you know what? Beyond that, he handled the lower level fighters the way you're supposed to. He submitted Thiago Alves in round 1, made that guy look like he didn't belong in the cage anymore, sent him to the bare knuckle fighting championship. He TKO'd Rick Rainey in the first round, same thing. And before that, he went to split decisions with Sergio Moraes and Bilal Muhammad. Two guys that have power, two guys that are technical, two guys that are good. And he took them all 15 minutes, and he lost by split decision to those guys. Tim Means is a guy that I feel like in hindsight I've been a little too harsh on. And in a spot like this where Mike Perry is just going to be a bull in a china shop, I think Tim Means is going to be able to pick him apart and be the more technical striker here and get the win.
And we're not betting on whether Tim Means can make a run toward a title or even a run toward contention. This is the perfect fight for Tim Means at this point in his career. He doesn't have a ton of fights left. He probably has 2 or 3 good fights left at a competitive elite level. He said he wanted to fight Mike Perry. He was excited at the opportunity to fight Mike Perry. I mean, Mike Perry had a fight lined up, and then it wasn't supposed to be Tim Means. And Tim Means was the first guy to jump in and say, I'll fight Mike Perry. Heck yeah. This is a fight that makes sense for both guys. And I think that Means can probably beat him here. I don't think Perry has anything left. And I wonder how long this soap opera in the UFC is going to continue. I think it's only continuing because he beat Mickey Gall. But all of us that watched that fight said, where's Mike Perry? Yeah. I mean, we deal with all this drama, ridiculousness, some of the garbage that just spews out of his mouth, because some of it is just straight up garbage. He is not the best dude in the world. I mean, there's a reason he doesn't have a gym. He doesn't have a train. He doesn't have anyone in his corner. There's a reason for all of that. But at the end of the day, he was always a banger and exciting in the octagon. That Mike Perry wasn't there against Mickey Gall anymore. This guy, you don't stay sharp with technique hitting your heavy bag in the garage. You actually need to train with professionals. Mike Perry isn't doing that anymore. How can you possibly have minus money on a guy who doesn't train with professional fighters anymore? It's amazing. I'm going to have to bet Tim Means. I'm just not thrilled to have to do it.
I agree. It's a spot that feels like a must-bet situation to me. And you know what? I've talked a couple times. It's been a while since we've had a spot like this, but I feel like some of the best bets I ever make are the hardest ones I have to make. I don't want to bet Tim Means. I feel like he's on the downswing. I don't know that he's trending the right direction. He's definitely not going to be making a title run or anything like that. But I have to, because this is the spot. And in those situations, I feel like we get the good side of it more often than not. So we're just going to have to plug our nose and pray on Saturday when we've got Tim Means in there against a round 1 Mike Perry that's looking to get a paycheck and get out of there as fast as possible.
Yep, I'm with you. I feel the exact same way.
You know what? And we've got a really educated chat here. We had somebody call out the fact that the clinch is going to be a problem for Mike Perry, and I couldn't agree more. I think that the nasty, nasty knees that Tim Means can throw in the clinch are going to be a problem for a guy like Mike Perry. And Tim Means has all the advantage on the ground. I know Mike Perry is strong. If he gets on top of you, he's a tough grappler. He can kind of stuff you there. But Tim Means is far more technical. He's not bad off his back. He'll be able to sweep. He'll be able to reverse. Yeah, I think it's. I think the wrong guy's favored. I think it's Means all day, and Perry's going to be a guy that gets kept around for freak show fights. He's gonna get that softball from the UFC because he's entertaining. Love him or hate him, he's entertaining. People like to tune in, so he'll go on a 2-fight losing streak, and then he'll get that Mickey Ball softball to keep him on the roster. But I honestly think that he's nowhere near the fighter that we saw even just 2 years ago.
Why is Mickey Gall still on the roster either? I mean, what is going on?
That's
is
a
beating
weird
CM
question.
Punk you beat CM Punk and that other guy, Mike Anderson or whatever, that was 0-1. That's not a very impressive run. When you look at who Mickey Gall's beat, none of them are in the UFC, that's for sure.
Yeah, Mickey Gall is a very, very questionable fighter. He's a guy that it seemed like he had the raw talent and ability. And let's remember, he's only 6-3. He still doesn't even have 10 professional fights, but it just doesn't seem like he's ever going to get there at this point. But you know what? His striking did look improved. In round 1 against Mike Perry, he beat him with a jab. Like, that's all he did in round 1 was jab Mike Perry's face off, and that was enough to put him at an advantage. It's his gas tank that's the problem. I don't know how you're ever going to correct that because it seems like he gets tired every single fight out.
Imagine a guy who lost to this version of Mike Perry and this version of Diego Sanchez. That's not a good guy.
No, you know what? He needs to pull out of a couple more fights to buy him some training time because he's barely clinging to this job. All right, we got a co-main event here. Biggest favorite on the card, Valentina the Bullet Shevchenko, who is 19-3, maybe the number 2 women greatest fighter of all time at this point. Jennifer Maia, who is 18-6, finds herself in a crazy title shot situation that really nobody saw coming, took advantage of a short notice replacement fight against JoJo Calderwood, and finds herself here with a big, big opportunity. Valentina Shevchenko is 14-1, 15-1, 16-1, depending on where you look. Biggest favorite on the card, just an absolute monster, standing, power, explosive, good grappling, sick jiu-jitsu. I'm going to keep this one short. Valentina Shevchenko is winning this fight. It's a matter of how, it's a matter of when. I think that Jennifer Maia may be tough and durable enough to stay in this one. I'm potentially looking at an over here, because she is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She's tough, and I think that she might be able to stay safe, and Valentina can kind of John Jones-esque play with her food a little bit on the feet. The total set here at 2.5. I'm looking at the over. That's what I got. How do you feel about this one, Matt?
Love the over. Think that is a great pick and a good eye by you. Even in the one big KO finish that she had, Shevchenko, it was a high kick against Jessica Eye that came out of nowhere. Besides that, she wears out of nowhere. I mean, it was a one-shot walk-away high kick that I never saw coming at all. But besides that, Shevchenko tends to kind of wear down her opponents. Great striking, very technical striking. Go back and look at some of her fights with Holly Holm and stuff. No wasted punches, no wasted strikes. She's not in there trying to bang it up. She will wait, counter, jab, throw front kicks. I think this one probably has a very good chance of at least, I think it has a 50-50 shot, to be honest, to go into the judges' scorecards, or at the very least taking a lot of accumulation of damage by Valentina to get the stop. The only thing that makes me nervous, but this is the only way, I think if they fight 10 times, it goes to at least round 3.5. We get the 12.5 minutes in at least 8 or 9 of those 10 times, and it's basically a coin flip, -110 both ways. But the only way I think this one ends early is if Maia actually scores a takedown or they get caught in a trip, because I do think if they end up in a scramble, it's possible Maia trying to get a sub could get subbed herself. Other than that, though, I think this one cruises into round 3 or 4. Valentina slowly starts to accumulate damage and either gets a late stoppage or cruises to a victory.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is one where, we talk about women's MMA all the time. They go to the judges' scorecards. They always go to the judges' scorecards. That's why you get those massive, massive lines. Well, because Jennifer Maia got a submission in her last fight over a JoJo Calderwood that just didn't want to be there that night.
Yeah.
And because Valentina Shevchenko has that highlight reel head kick, I think we're getting value on this over. This over 2.5 should be minus 200. Instead, we're getting minus 110. And it's a spot that I've talked about doing this a couple times. I have yet to actually pull the trigger and do it. We'll see if I get there this week. Lay the chalk on the over 1.5. Get the even money at over 2.5. Get plus money at over 3.5, over 4.5, and then bet fight goes to decision. And if you hit those first two, you're free rolling on the other 3.
Yeah.
And just ride this fight out and see if you can make it all the way to the judges' scorecards.
I love that.
Might be the way to play this one. I talked about doing that on the Brian Ortega fight, and I chickened out at the last second because I thought that the zombie was going to clip him with something. I did play the over 2.5, and we got that one there, but I felt like I left 4 or 5 units on the table by not going with the whole thing. This one might be the spot. This might be one where I pull that.
I love that. You know what? I want to ask one question. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but considering that Cynthia Calvillo fought before Maia did, so the UFC, I mean, maybe Andrade had too much recency to it, and so it was never going to be Andrade. But I think Andrade still could have been an option here. But at the very least, Calvillo was an option. How in the heck did the UFC matchmakers decide that Jennifer Maia, on a 1-fight win streak, with that one win against the shot JoJo Calderwood, I mean, this was never going to be good, and they didn't have a main event for a while to this. That was going to be the main? I mean, this just seems like something's up here. Somebody owe Maia a favor or something?
I really think it's just a case of them needing to fill a slot. I think, the JoJo Calderwood and Shevchenko fight, that one got pushed back because Shevchenko had an injury, and that's why the JoJo and Maia fight happened in the first place. And then when one of the biggest draws in women's MMA today, everyone loves watching Shevchenko. There are very few finishers in women's MMA like her and like Nunes. People love this girl. And when she's your champion and she says, no, I fight in November. Okay, you fight in November. So with Maia getting that win, especially doing it impressively, getting that finish over Calderwood, I just think she was in the right place at the right time, man. Cynthia Calvillo needs to get another win after her last one. That was not impressive enough to, warrant a title shot, in my opinion. And even though Andrade's win was impressive enough to warrant that title shot, I just think she was too late. This fight was already booked. It was already happening. The ball was rolling.
Yeah.
If they had waited a month to book it, maybe we'd have Andrade versus Shevchenko this weekend instead. But I think Shevchenko probably wanted to go ahead and get that paycheck.
Yeah, I just think at some point it's a disservice to the fans. One thing I always loved about MMA and UFC in general, but especially UFC. I mean, MMA for the most part doesn't have those wide gaps like boxing does. Like everyone raved about, Terrence Crawford and Kell Brook. The line was 1-25. That's not a main event. That's not good matchmaking. They tried to all pitch it like it was a super fight. When you have to bet $100 to win 4 on the favorite, that's not a super fight. There's more even matchups out there.
Yeah.
And UFC's always done so much better than that. We just rarely get these. And look, Valentina is going to be a big chalk against anyone, but she's not going to be this kind of chalk against Calvillo, Andrade. This one, it felt like, I guess it is what it is, but.
Yeah, and that's, I love MMA that they make the hard matchups. They make these guys fight each other. There's no playing stupid games like boxing does where you have to wait until the other guy's over the hill before you're willing to take that risk. No, they do a good job in the UFC, but then you get rare occurrences, John Jones, Khabib, Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes, that are just head and shoulders above everybody else. that sometimes you don't have a good fight for them. And unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves on Saturday.
But what's the biggest favorite Khabib ever was? I don't think Khabib was ever like maybe the Daryl Horcher, whatever his name was, fight. I think he was like minus 1,000. But other than that, he's always like minus 300, minus 400.
In fairness, though, 155 is the premier division of the UFC. It's the most stacked weight class. You've got guys like Ferguson and Gaethje and Poirier, Conor McGregor, guys that can put you out with a single punch. Like this women's division just is not stacked that way. And like you said, there's a couple names in the division that when they get up to challenger, we'll see a slightly shorter line, but she'll be minus 700. She'll be minus 600, minus, it won't be that big of a gap, but I think it's the level of competition in that spot.
No, you're right. And I love the analysis. I'm going to bet it over 2.5, 3.5, 4.5 and go the distance.
I
already have over 2.5 minus 110, but I'm going to complete the whole caboose here and take the whole train ride.
I like it. Let's do it. Let's just ride that crazy train. And that'll be a fun way to watch a potentially boring fight. If they're grappling or if they're sitting at range and doing a whole lot of nothing, we're just going to be watching those seconds on the clock tick by, doing this every single time we get by a minute. So it'll make that fight much more entertaining, in my opinion.
And I don't think she's going to want to hurt Jennifer late. I wouldn't be surprised if she puts 3 or 4 rounds in the bank and just cruises late, and Jennifer doesn't have the gas tank to try to hurt her anyway. She knows Jennifer is not going to be a threat anymore and just cruises.
I agree. I think Jennifer is going to be a little too slow in there, and I think she's not going to have much to offer as far as offense goes. She won't be able to catch her. She won't be able to close the distance. So honestly, we may see a spot where Shevchenko Chookagian kicks her leg from range and circles her for a good 4 rounds. And you never know. If, like you said, if they end up in a scramble on the floor, somebody could catch an arm. Somebody could catch a neck, but I'm never going to bet on anybody submitting Jennifer Maia because the one thing she has going for her is a sick Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So if it ends up in a ground scramble, I'm hoping it's a stalemate and we just burn some time off that clock.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, it is main event time, everybody. This is odds.com. I have our special guest here, Matthew Holt, the president of US Integrity, hanging out with us this evening. Please make sure that you hit the like button, share the show, get it out there. Those of you who are with me live tonight, you got to view the whole thing firsthand. The replay of this is going to be exclusive to odds.com. That's what we've decided to do. So those of you here right now listening to this, no problem. But share the video out there to make sure everybody else gets an opportunity to see it. I will tweet the link where it's going to be exclusive on odds probably tomorrow. David, I want to go ahead and address this, buddy. We're getting hoodies, folks. We're doing the Diehard MMA Podcast logo, and we're going to get some hoodies because it's getting a little colder out there. Hopefully, we'll have some news very, very soon, and I will pass that along to you guys as soon as possible. Main event time, flyweight fight between Deiveson Figueiredo, 19-1, taking on Alex Perez, who is 24-5. This is a pretty great main event, in my opinion. I know Alex Perez is filling in here. A lot of people don't really know him well enough to understand how good he is and how dangerous he is. But he's a solid fighter, and I'm really excited about this one. You know, Figueiredo, this dude's raw power. That's all this guy does. He actually has a slightly negative by 0.01 significant strike ratio because he's willing to take one to give one, and you just can't take the one that he gives back. He's explosive, decent wrestling. His jiu-jitsu game is improving every single time we see him. That was his weakness early on in his career, and that weakness has really, that door has just shut. He is not a bad fighter on the ground anymore. Alex Perez on the flip side of this thing, lots of experience for his age. I like this kid. He got a nasty leg kick TKO victory in his last fight. And he's a solid wrestler. That's what this guy does. He's got good boxing, fast hands. That calf kick, he goes to it constantly, and then he wants to put you on your back foot and take you down. I just don't see him having any success there. I think when he comes in to close that range to try and take a leg shot on Deiveson Figueiredo, he's going to eat one of those big power bombs right down the middle, and I don't think he's going to be big enough and strong enough to hold the God of War down long enough to make it be much of a difference. I think Deiveson Figueiredo is going to do the damn thing like always. And, you know, we had a KO by Joe Benavidez against Alex Perez not so long ago. And again, MMA math never works. So you can't say that just because Joe knocked him out, that means Deiveson Figueiredo will. But a shot Joe Benavidez was able to put Alex Perez out and quickly. A prime Deiveson Figueiredo should have the opportunity to do the same. What are you doing here, Matt?
This one's a little bit correlated for me. I think if you like Figueiredo, then you could also take a shot at parlaying it with the under. Because again, if Alex Perez can't get those takedowns in that wrestling game going early, he's in deep trouble. And who's the only guy to beat Figueiredo? Jussier Formiga, and he did it by using his wrestling. So at the end of the day, if you like Perez too, to me, why not take a shot at over 1.5 rounds? Perez isn't getting a finish early in this one. If he's winning this fight, it's because he's able to keep Figueiredo on the ground, wear him down a bit. It may turn into a choke later, but I also think it's because he's accumulating control time and probably winning rounds. So I think this one's a bit correlated. If you like the underdog here, why not also take a little shot at parlaying it with the over and really juice up the parlay, the payday you're going to get. Whereas if you like Figueiredo and you don't want to lay minus 300, why not parlay it with the under? And at the end of the day, take a minus 300 favorite and turn him into like minus 120.
So they've actually got the total set at 1.5 for this one. The over 1.5 is minus 135. The under 1.5 is plus 105. If you like Perez, I mean, trust me, I am enticed by the dog odds myself. I love the big underdogs, but lay minus 135. Perez is not going to finish a guy like Deiveson Figueiredo in the first round. It's just not going to happen. So even if he does well for the first 2 rounds and then ends up getting clipped late or ends up getting robbed on a split decision, you won your bet on that 1.5 rounds. You couldn't have nailed that on the head better, Matt. That is a great look for anybody who's looking at the underdog here. And you know what? Even if you like Deiveson Figueiredo, that over 1.5 is still totally in play here, in my opinion.
They're flyweights.
They're flyweights. And the recency bias. He was able to clip Joe Benavidez, who's a fighter that is aging and slowing in a division where speed is life. And before that, he got Tim Elliott, who was on maybe the worst run of his entire career. He's redoubled down now. He's looking better these days. But at that time, Tim Elliott was the lowest point of his life. Before that, he fought Pantoja and went full 15 minutes. He fought Formiga and went a full 15 minutes. And he even ended up KOing John Morgan over that 1.5 in the second round. I think that Perez is a improving, tough, durable kid. And I completely agree with you. I think over is not a bad look here since it's lined at that 1.5 spot, no matter which side of the fight you like.
I actually have a feeling Perez is going to get a fast start and win round 1 by getting some takedowns. But I think he's going to have to work really, really hard to do it. And I think by round 2, I don't think he's going to gas. I just think he'll be a little less, gas a little bit. And that little bit will be enough for Figueiredo to start turning the tide. And that rounds 3, 4, and 5, if the fight doesn't get finished in one of those rounds, will all be Figueiredo rounds. But I think Perez is going to put in a good account of himself for the first 10 minutes of the fight.
I absolutely agree. I think that there's a good chance if you've got access to live betting, this could be a live bet spot. Because if Perez is going to have any success, it's going to be early. And you could get a much, much cheaper price on the favorite, who right now is sitting at 3-1, if you wanted to go ahead and look that way. So honestly, we're giving you guys out gold nuggets on this main event here. There's a lot of different ways to approach it. What I have done is gone the square route. I told you guys way early on, the very first fight of the night, Louis Cosce in a parlay, closing that out with the God of War, Deiveson Figueiredo. Those two will net you about minus 152, and that's a chalky parlay, but I think it cashes. I'm laying 3.04 units to win, 2 units at that minus 152 line. Both guys I feel like can finish. Both guys can win by decision if they need to, and that's the reason I'm parlaying them, because if you want to look inside the distance on both of them, I do think they both end up getting a knockout, but I don't want to disrespect their opponents here. They're fighting tough guys that could make these fights close, drag them out, and all we got to do is get the win. So I think you can take Figueiredo. I think you can take the over 1.5. I think you can live bet this one, but I do in the end see Deiveson Figueiredo getting his hand raised.
Love it.
And are you going to end up locking in that 1.5, or are you gonna put any other action on this one? What are you looking for?
I haven't bet the over yet, but I'm definitely going to.
Okay.
But I need to bet it now because I'm worried that this total is going to close more like 1.5 over minus 160. And while we told some people to wait on some, this isn't one you should wait on. You should bet it now because I think by Wednesday or Thursday, it's over 1.5 minus 150, 160.
That's an excellent point because it's already gone from minus 128 to minus 137. So yeah, if you like this over 1.5, jump on it now because it looks like that's the way that it's headed. And you know what? I couldn't have said it any better, Jay Short. They both have good gas tanks. And Perez may have success early with that wrestling, but we've seen that Figueiredo just does not stop. He will get up in the third round. He will get up in the fourth round, and he will come back and try and put it on Perez. This is going to be a big step up for Perez. It's his first time, I believe, going for actually, he's got a 5-round fight all the way back in like 2015, but it's been a long time. He's never had a fight like this at the UFC level. So, we'll see how it goes. I like Perez. I think he's a good, solid young prospect, but I fully expect Deiveson to do what Deiveson does. And I'm probably going to end up sprinkling the 3, 4, and 5 round props like I always do on these dangerous, dangerous finisher main event spots, because if Perez slows down, Deiveson will catch him with something big later.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being with us this evening. We gave out a lot of awesome information this evening. Huge thank you to you, Matt, for hanging out with us on stream, as always. If you want to shout anything out, tell people where to find you or what's going on. The floor is yours, my friend.
No, thanks. Hey, thanks as always. I always enjoy breaking down these pay-per-views. This is a really fun card. Anybody that wants to hit me up at Matthew Holt _USI. Thanks again, Clint. Best of luck this weekend, everybody. Take care.
Good luck, Matt. Have a good one. All right. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me this evening. That was a very solid and entertaining episode, in my opinion. I had a great time. I appreciate all of you. Angie, Stig, Miller, Geek, Go, Freddie, Austin. We got Sloppy Seconds. We've got, the chat is moving. Grunge, Yos, Big Bob's Bargain, 9 minutes. We have got all kinds of fun names in here. Danny Seho. I saw my boy Boston Nick MMA and Mills pop in for a moment. I appreciate you guys. 7 Ninjas. Thank you all so much for the love and support. You guys are the best. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here doing what I do. Hope this show was entertaining and fun for you, even though we're coming off of a rough event last time out. Let's do our best to get some of that cash back. We got to make some of that money back that we dropped last weekend on a garbage card. This is going to be a fun event. Y'all have a great day. And you know what? Usually I've got something super inspiring and warm, fuzzy feeling for you at the end of the show. But I've got 4 minutes to go turn on the Vikings, who are about to beat the brakes off of the Bears and show everybody that we are not as bad as our record shows. Skull, baby. Watch out for me on Twitter tonight, because even though it's the Diehard MMA podcast, I may be tweeting some football. Give me a follow at Diehard MMA Pod. I'll be tweeting out my bets as I lock them in. We've got a couple spots for UFC 255 where we want to just be a little patient in to see if we can get the best line. Good vibes to everybody. Blessings to everybody. Be positive. Go out there and be nice to people in a world that very much needs it these days. Good luck on all your degenerate action. Let's roll, and I will see you all just a little later in the week. Have a good one.